Hello, and thank you so much for joining us here today for this Access Control Information Seminar. My name is Sarah O'Donnell. I'm the Communications Director with the Irish Security Industry Association. As you may be aware, we ran a wonderful series of information seminars on access control and the PSA standard PSA 67 2021. They went incredibly well, were extremely well attended, and we were so delighted to have both Pat Jefferies from Abloy there with us and Paul Scallon and Siobhan from the PSA there with us to give some really critical information on this standard and what it means for you as installers of access control systems. We'd hoped to record the presentations at the events, and that was not possible due to technical issues. So I am so pleased that Pat Jefferies has made himself available today to do the presentation again, and which will be, I am sure, just as good as it was in person. We do understand that won't then provide you with the opportunity to do Q&A, but Pat will certainly make his details available. And we would certainly hope to be holding more events in partnership with Abloy in the future. But for now, my pleasure to introduce you to Pat Jefferies, who's going to take you through some of the key points of this very important standard, PSA 67 2021.
Well, thank you, Sarah, for that very kind introduction. As we all know, we were planning to actually record this live. Unfortunately, the wonders of modern technology proved to be a challenge on the day. But we are now at least connected over a Teams connection. That's also been a challenge, but let's not go into that one. But hopefully we are now recording this session for posterity going forward. And of course, as per usual, we've chosen the hottest day of the year to actually do it. But look, the reality is let's try and get this presentation wrapped up and talk a little bit about the PSA and actually escape doors and certainly the new regulations that have recently been introduced. So as a starting point, for those of you who don't know me or have not met me before, my name is Pat Jefferies. Now, I am the commercial director at Abloy UK, and let's start from a very honest perspective here. The products that I'm showing you today, or the solutions that create these products, clearly are our products, and commercial does mean sales. However, for my sins, I've been with the business now for 27 years. That's Abloy UK. And prior to that, I worked for the Chubb Lock Company. And I've always been very much more in a technical role than necessarily a pure sales role. As a business, Abloy UK do take a great deal of interest working with the various trade bodies and standards associations to actually drive these new legislation and the new ideas through. So for my sins, I am a qualified architectural ironmonger. I've done my full training with the Guild of Architectural Ironmongers. I am also actually the BSI UK technical representative for BSEM 14846 electric locks and strike plates, and also on the mirror committee for BSEN 13637, which actually is the standard we're going to talk about today. But clearly, let's drop the BS bit because this presentation is aimed at our colleagues in Ireland, and of course is brought to you in conjunction with the ISIA and also the PSA as the governing body. Again, really reaffirming here, that makes me the SEN UK technical representative within Europe. And yep, we have gone through Brexit, but let's not go through that scenario, because in all reality, even at home, this doesn't make any difference, because European standards are not actually policed by the European Parliament. They're actually from SEN-elect, which is a membership of 32 member states. More locally, I work very closely with the Door Hardware Federation and the Guild of Architectural Ironmongers. Again, I sit on their technical committees. Really, the introduction is just to give you a little bit of confidence that I do understand the subject that I'm going to talk about today. And of course, the subject we're going to talk about at some length today is EM13637, which is for electrically controlled exit systems for use on escape routes. And of course, this dovetails very neatly into the new PSA legislation 67, dated 2021. And you know, these two requirements join together quite nicely. So firstly, what is EM13637? Well, it is actually a standard that comprises of three elements. Now, we've actually got the electric control device, we've got an initiating element, and we've got an electric lock-in element. And all of these elements need to be tested together as a complete solution. We've actually put this word mandatory up because this one is actually not a standard. It's harmonized under the constructions product regulation. Construction product regulation does cover EM179 and EM1125, which we will talk about. They are mandatory, but this is now mandatory under PSA 67 in the Republic of Ireland. It's very important to understand it's not a cobbled together solution because all of these items need to be tested together. So in simplistic terms here, we actually have an electric controlling element. Now that will always allow things to fail unlocked, and of course always should be connected to the building's fire alarm system to ensure that in the event of a fire alarm activation, escape will be unhindered. We then actually have in the middle here, we actually have our initiating element, and this will be via an illuminated resettable switch. And that will actually release the door mechanism, which of course is secured by a fail unlocked electric locking device. And you'll pick up something very, very quickly here, that this is actually a secondary locking device. So in virtually all applications, and certainly under the PSA 67 requirement, this will always be something that's added in addition to the basic requirement, EM179 or EM1125. I'm also going to put a tiny bit of negativity in here because the reality is just because we can doesn't mean you actually should. So what am I really saying? Well, look, we're actually talking about blocking an escape door. Now, we may be blocking that for justifiable reasons, but what we should always ask ourselves is, do we really need to do that? Can we achieve this another way? If we actually left this door free, could we secure other doors that are non-escape doors and actually achieve the same requirement? So I think the big thing here is this is never going to be the norm, which really leads me on nicely to our first slide here, because our default or normal position will always be the two standards that have been around for some considerable period of time. And the first one is EM179. It's a building hardware standard. And what this actually describes is how we would exit through an emergency exit device. And of course, what we do know here is that's going to be a tested lever handle or tested push pad. And these should always be used on escape doors. Now, our escape door, and you'll notice we're using the word escape, not fire exit, actually applies to, of course, the final exit door, the door we need to leave the building from. But it does also apply to all doors en route or across the final escape route, which really ought to be obvious because there's actually no point in providing escape at the final exit if doors en route actually don't allow us to get to that final door. So it's quite important to understand it's not just that final exit we're referring to. EM179 does have a sister standard, and that sister standard would be EM1125. Again, it's a building hardware standard. And that's actually for panic exit devices operated by a horizontal bar. And they will be used again on escape doors, but that would be for a different category of use. That would be where we're unfamiliar with the building or where we've got lots of people. Again, we will touch on that as we go through our presentation. And of course, as we've already mentioned, these standards are actually HENS or small HEN, which means they're a harmonized standard. And they've been mandatory under the constructions product regulations since 2013. I think PSA 67 is now encompassing both these standards. And again, as I've suggested, making this very much the norm, but actually also accepting that there are occasions or times when we might need to do something different, which is when we will introduce the 13637 as an addition overlaid on top of the prescribed escape system applicable to that door type. Because this is a harmonized standard, any device that we actually fit onto that door must actually have a valid CE mark. Now, CE marking is very dangerous. It's also one of the most contentious areas of the legislation. And suffice to say, the big thing we really need to understand here is it's not just any CE mark. The CE mark that we see on the lock case or the CE mark that we see on any device must actually be a CE mark that's representative of the intended use of the product. And the reality is what we should always be looking for is our declaration of performance, our DOP. And a DOP is a legal document that needs to change hands between the manufacturer and actually the end customer to prove that we fitted a product that's fit for purpose. Now, there's a lot to actually understand about standards. And from an Abloy UK perspective, we have now for 12 years successfully run our Abloy Foundation course. This is run on a monthly basis at our head office in Willenhall in the West Midlands. And again, that invitation is extended to any of our Irish colleagues who wish to come and visit the UK. We'll make you very welcome. But we are also looking and do actually run road shows. Several have been run in the past in Ireland, and certainly that's something that we're looking to add to that equation. Now, Foundation course is a full-day course, but it runs through all the standards. It gives everybody a lot more understanding, a lot more detail. But what we need to do here now is just quickly bring ourselves up to speed and look at what we've actually already got, because we've got EN 179 2008, which is for an emergency escape device. And what we can see here is that escape is going to be via a live and tested lever handle or a live and tested paddle handle. It makes no difference to the function or the method of escape from the door, whether this is an electric lock-in requirement or indeed a mechanical requirement. If a door is an escape door before we've actually started, it needs to be an escape door when we've finished. So I've just created a very short video which actually explains how an EN 179 device works. There's actually no sound to this in terms of a voiceover. Hopefully it's actually quite self-explanatory. But what we're really looking at here is we're looking at how we would escape an emergency escape door, which is a door en route or across the final exit. And this is a typical access control solution. You'll see that I'm reading in, and once my credential is recognized, I open the door and I go through the door. I've now got a fail lock device providing for dynamic lockdown on the outside of the door. But whatever I do, I'm going to have a single action, a single means of escape with a CE marked escape device on the inside, regardless of power. With the power down, the power broken, nothing can actually stop me escaping through that door. So that's the basic concept of EN 179 for emergency escape doors. We've always known that we've got a sister standard, and in this case, our sister standard is EN 1125 for panic exit devices. And of course, this is where we've now got an escape door where the users are unfamiliar with the building, or maybe we've got an assembly. Now, assembly is defined within the European standard as a maximum of 60 escapees, but building regulations in the Republic of Ireland, Part B, actually reduce that, because you can always do more than, you can't do less than. They reduce that to a maximum number of 50 escapees through a 179 door. If we have more than 50 escapees going through that single door, the risk it's considered that a panic is likely to ensue. And in that circumstance, we would need to upgrade from an emergency escape device, lever or paddle handle, to a panic bar. And again, the same applies here. Just because we want to make that door access control doesn't mean that we can compromise how that door actually works. The functionality needs to be exactly the same. So once again, very short video just explaining 1125 briefly, which actually is looking at a panic escape door. And the panic bar can actually be fitted on the same lock as we looked at before. And what we've actually got here is a panic bar that's always going to allow me to escape. It's purely mechanical, but that's operating an electric lock, which gives us fail locked from the secure side, but we've always got our escape ability from the inside. So really, again, just recapping here, and we've kind of touched on this because, look, emergency exit signs are always a good indication that a door might be an escape door. But we also do need to remember that when we're working within our office environment, there may not be a sign above the door because we've conducted regular evacuation drills. So we actually know where that door is. We know where our muster station is. So it's not just a door with a sign above it. We do need to look for the natural escape routes around the building. And of course, as we've already discussed, the fact that we actually have an escape door, we must be able to access that escape door from anywhere within the building, which is why you will see it actually says here, these new standards apply to doors en route or across the final, across the escape route, not just that final exit door. And I'm sure you can appreciate that, there's absolutely no point in providing a means of escape if we actually can't get to that door. So just again to look at these two standards in a little bit more detail. This is actually our old building in Watford before we moved to the West Midlands. But EM 179 for emergency escape doors applies to areas of a public building that are non-public areas with trained staff. So let me try and break this down a bit. Areas of a public building, well, they're actually not a residential house. They're actually not multi-occupancy dwelling. In multi-occupancy dwelling, you can do slightly less, but equally, I would say if you follow the rules that we're going to learn today, you're actually doing a little bit more, but you actually are providing for life safety. And what it actually says is all doors on or across the escape route must be accessible via a live lever handle or paddle handle. But if we come back to that on non-public areas, well, look, when you came to Abloy, we actually had Miriam, and Miriam was the voice in the face of Abloy. If you called us, Miriam would say, "Hello, Abloy UK, how can I help you?" And if actually you turned up, we didn't have a trade counter. We didn't have a public shop. All we actually had was a reception door with an entry system on. You press the entry system, Miriam would answer the door, she'd make you a cup of coffee, and she would call your host for the day, and then you would be inducted into the building. So you, like me, then would become a trained member of staff. And in the event of a need to escape, and we practice this every Monday at 2 o'clock, we'd come out, that was the academy in that particular part of the building there. We'd go around to the back of the building. And when we're at the back of the building, a register will be taken, including the visitors. And of course, now I've got a really important message, and we took this very, very seriously. Because when the emergency services turn up, I'm either going to say everybody's present and accounted for. We've taken a roll call at the muster station and everybody's accounted for. In which case, they're just going to pour water on, put the fire out because it's only locks and paper that's left in the building. But actually, if I say, well, look, unfortunately, one of our members of staff is actually missing. I think that they were somewhere around here in the building. I've just made a very, very important decision because I'm now going to put a member of the emergency services life at risk because they're going to have to go in and try and rescue those people. So you can see why we've got the two standards here, but what that also leads us to is it leads us to look at what we've got for BSEM 1125, which is for our panic escape doors. So in the first instance here, we've actually got if you imagine you've gone to the cinema, maybe a little bit of time since we've all done that with our lockdown that we had over the last couple of years. But when you wander in, you don't know where the escape doors are, but actually you do. And the reason you do is there's two big green illuminated running men either side of the screen. The low level lighting had directed you to a seat. You'd sat down. In the event of a fire alarm activation, low level lighting turns round and directs you to your nearest exit, those two big green signs by either side of the screen. Now, when we actually get to that door, we haven't got time to faff around. We can't open the door towards us as we can with an emergency escape door. We also need that door to open because we've got maybe 600 people behind us And any delay for us to escape would cause or can cause major loss of life. So wherever we hit that door, across 60% of the width, the door will actually naturally open and allow us all to escape to safety. Nothing changes because we want to make that an access control door or an electric locking door. We still need to provide for panic escape. Now, the word assemblies, as we've already mentioned, assemblies means something slightly different in the Republic of Ireland. It's only the number that changes. In fairness, in my head, I always use 50 in the UK because it gives me a margin of error. But you would need less than 50 people going through a single door to actually use a 179 risk. And if you had more than 50 people going through that door, even if the risk was actually with trained staff, you actually would need to use a panic bar on there because a panic is likely to ensue. Now, really a little bit going back to basics, and this would be very much part of the foundation course, because one of the things I actually asked myself in July 2013 was, look, I needed an easier way of actually getting people to take the basic concept of the door. So, we're speaking to our customer, and the customer said, well, look, I'll run meetings in here. I want a simple form of access control. And of course, simple, we arguably could interpret as cheap. Well, cheap is not necessarily the best solution, but more importantly, whilst we need to understand what the customer is looking for, we actually need to understand why the door is fitted. And what it led me to conclude was there were actually 6 different types of door. We've got door type A, which is not a fire door. It's not an escape door. Now, in all honesty, we can fit whatever we like on that door because it's not going to protect us in the event of fire. It's also not going to actually be part of our escape route, but it might be a door that we want to lock things behind. It might be a door that we would want to restrict access to. We've got no restrictions because there's no actual requirement there. We now get to door type B, which is a non-fire door and an emergency escape door. Now, that's very likely to be from an office building, perhaps a small office building, less than 50 escapees. It's likely to be that final exit door because, no, it's not a fire door, but it is an emergency escape door. And then we have a legal requirement under the construction's product regulation to fit an EM179 CE mark device and actually provide them with that DOP to prove that that product is suitable. We've actually got the same door here. It's not a fire door, but now we've just changed the risk. It's now a panic escape door. And of course, here we need a product that actually provides for escape. In this case, it's going to be a panic bar. So we're looking for a product that's CE marked to EM1125. We've now just got a fire door, but no escape requirement. It could be a cupboard, it could be a plant room. It's somewhere where we've got something that is potentially combustible or likely to fuel a fire. It's almost certainly going to be on an escape route, so we're providing protection to allow people to escape by a potential risk. And in this particular case, we're actually looking for an electric lock that is CE marked to EM14846, but this doesn't come under PSA 67 because this is not an escape door. Next, we find quite a common door. We find loads of these within commercial buildings, large, small, and that door is actually a fire door and an emergency escape door. So this really needs to do a dual function. Number one is it needs to close and it needs to provide a compartment seal. And legally, we have to fit a fire tested product. But equally, we also have to fit a product that's actually going to allow us to escape in the direction of escape, which means we need an emergency escape lock, which is CE marked both to EN179, but also CE marked to say that it's been fire tested to EN1634 Part 1. And last but not least, we've got the sister standard here, exactly the same as above. The only thing that's changed here is we changed from an emergency escape door to a panic escape door. Maximum number of escapees is increased, or the category of use is changed. If you look at the symbols on the side there, you can see door type A, there's no requirement. Door type B, it's purely escape. Door type C, purely escape. Door type D is purely fire. A door type E is actually fire and escape, and door type F is also fire and escape. Now, one of the questions I often get asked, so, does this mean that we can't fit a magnet to any door? Well, actually, look, an electromagnet can be fitted to door type A. There are no requirements. An electromagnet can probably be fitted to door type D, provided the magnet actually has fire test evidence. It's not an escape door. We're looking purely for fire integrity. We can fit fire tested magnets to door type D. Now, just moving on a fraction, because one of the things we've actually said here is that the compliant solution is a lever handle or a paddle handle or a panic bar. Well, to some extent, that's actually true, but also like this 13637 standard, it's a combination of products working together. So we've actually got the escape lock here, we've got the striker plate, and we've got the handle, all CE marked as a solution to 179. It doesn't mean we can only fit one lock, one strike plate, one handle. It doesn't necessarily mean they all have to come from one manufacturer. Having said that, they do need to actually be mentioned on a declaration of performance to EM179. And of course, you might think, well, of course, this makes life really interesting because, you have to buy the Abloy strike plate to go with the Abloy lock. Surely that's just Abloy creating themselves a market. Well, look, actually, no, you'll see that bottom hole there is actually larger than the top hole. So the deadbolt goes into the larger hole and the latch bolt goes into the narrower hole. And the whole idea here is all of these locks must work under side pressure. So I would say to you, just because a lock looks like it meets these requirements, unless it's actually CE marked and stamped to say that it does, we always have to question. And one of the reasons that this particular aperture here is larger is, look, the dead latch is actually dead latched. So until that bolt, that handle is depressed and the bolt is fully retracted into the lock case, the latch bolt remains dead latched. At that point, it collapses and allows you to escape. So there's never any side pressure on the lock. So it's not just any lock, it really needs to be a product. Well, it absolutely needs to be a product that's actually CE marked as suitable for use. And there are lots and lots of suppliers that can actually supply mechanical and electromechanical products that meet these two standards. So strangely, we talked more about 179 and 1125 than we actually have about 13637. And of course, the reality is that that's actually quite right, because these two standards are without doubt the norm. We're only actually going to use 13637 when we don't have a choice, when we got something special, when we've got something different, because we should never be blocking an escape door unless we've got good reason to do so. And it does take me back to, just because you can doesn't mean you should, which again, reinforcing that slightly more, technically we are discussing restricting escape through, we are technically resisting egress through an escape door. And just because we could doesn't mean we should. The reality is we do now actually have EM13637, which is a solution that, if you get the risk assessment, I really need to read out on that door. Why? Well, if we can actually justify that, and I will talk about a couple of scenarios a little bit later on, then this is a solution that can actually be used to provide for that read-in, read-out situation. The thing we do need to be aware of is that we obviously need to avoid things like chains, and there are certainly some horror stories in the past where people have lost lives because exit was impeded by panic bars. And where I'm really saying here that EM13637s are not the norm, they're only when we don't have another solution. And of course, the reality is they're not actually also an option to go back to providing these three components from three different places, all interface to the building's fire alarm system, because it's very, very clear that what we've actually got here is we've got a system like the 179, which was a handle, a lock case, and a striker plate. In this case, we've got control, activation, and blocking that must be covered on a single DOP. That doesn't actually mean, again, it needs to come from a single manufacturer. What it needs to be done is it needs to be placed on the market by a supplier that can provide a declaration of conformity or test evidence to prove that their product meets the requirements of EM 13637. So where might we use this? Well, look, read in, read out access control application. Now, they've been used sometimes for, I would argue, possibly the wrong reason. We've also often used a product, the EL561, which actually is a handle controlled lock both sides. So we then put in an emergency call point and a break glass. Well, let's change that to actually put in the escape door system. So we've now got a compliant means of escaping. Is the 561 acceptable? Well, the answer is no. Because look, if I go to that door and I pull the handle down operation 1 and hit the control point operation 2, I still won't get out. I'd have to pull the handle back up operation 3, pull the handle back down operation 4, which is specifically outlawed on that requirement. There's also the truth that it would actually fail when locked on the secure side, which is not always desirable, because from an escape perspective, it's all about getting out. We don't want to allow the people to get back in. But there are applications where read in, read out is required. I've got a data room. Data's the new gold. I really want to know who's in there, who's going in and been out at what time, so I have an operational requirement. Then it's certainly possible to actually consider using this EM 13637 solution overlaid on top of a 179 or 1125 solution. Nursery school, this is one of the first projects we did. It was very much a life safety scenario. 2 new doors, actually an access control system, electric locks, escape door systems, all interface to the building's fire alarm system. I could explain the whole application here, but look, the escape bit is really the important bit here, because we use delay in this particular case. Now, on the event of the building's fire alarm activation, door would be free. But if Johnny went up to the door and actually tried to press the button to open the door, there was a 15-second delay. Now, that was timed knowing that the nursery nurse would get to that door in about 10 seconds so that she could stop Johnny from escaping that door. And you might again question that, but in this particular case, that led on to a dual carriageway, 70-mile-an-hour traffic. So that was justified with a risk assessment and a life safety application. Restrict the use of designated escape doors for escape only, or quite an interesting one. Look, if you come to Willenhall, we've got lots of panic escape doors for the factory staff to actually escape the building. They're down all 3 sides of the factory. So it's not going to be very, very far until an operative would be escaping. But me being a smoker, I go to the smoking area, which is in the furthest corner. And of course, I'm supposed to use the last exit to go out. But we use any exit we actually can do. On a hot day, we go out the nearest exit to get as much sun as we can. And on a wet day, we go out the proper exit. But what I could do is I could fit these terminals on all of these doors to force people to use the door that I want them to do. And it would not inhibit people's escape, because on fire alarm activation, all the doors will be free, and you've always got this button to press to actually escape through those doors. Could take that a stage further and actually say, well, look, let's try and enhance the security of the building. How many times have we been asked to fit a deadlock on an escape door? Oh yeah, we'll unlock it every morning, we'll lock it at night. Absolutely no. Should never be done. Should never have been done. Tell you many horror stories of being in buildings hours after they're open, and you know what I'm going to say, doors are still locked. But what we could do here is we could actually use this as an enhanced security and arguably connect it to the intruder system, or we could connect it to the access control system and actually put it on a time zone. We're not going to stop people from escaping, but between the hours of 8 and 6, the doors are free. People can go in and out as they wish to. But before hours and out of hours, it reverts back to a 13637 solution. We maybe still can read out, but in an event of an emergency, fire alarm goes off, or we press the button and we can actually escape. One of the big things here that we often come up is, look, I really need to be able to monitor that door. Well, yeah, you do need to monitor the door. A chain's not a great idea. but sports stadiums and other venues. And, you know, certainly the picture I showed you was actually a venue where the bar had been chained because it was deemed to be insecure. But we cannot risk life safety here. But what we can do is we could put a 13637 on solution on that door that would actually stop people allowing people in. So there are lots and lots of uses where we may do it. Now, look, you know, with the greatest respect, Ireland's a very safe country. You know, terrorism is not something that you are used to. But from a UK perspective, this is quite useful. It does allow us to enhance the security. I mean, if we did work to PSA legislation 67, we will at least have fail locked escape doors from the secure side. So we've already taken a major step forward. We've always got these special areas, hospitals, care homes, you know, where patients have got special needs. And, you know, look, certainly my father-in-law was in a care home, and, you know, he was suffering with dementia. But the one thing he could learn is he could watch people using the keypad to actually escape, and learn how to escape that door. So again, you know, there are considerations here where we're not going to stop people from escaping when they need to escape. But what we are going to do is we're going to prevent them from harming themselves. There is also controlling the flow of people. Now we're getting into something a little bit more specialized here, but, you know, this is controlling the flow of people. You know, certainly, you know, you've gone to your airport and you're wandering down the departure lounge at Dublin Airport in Terminal 1. Quite a long walk actually to Ryanair, as we all know. Doors in front of us actually close, and there's a big red light shining there, buzzers going, but the door is blocked. Now I would actually have to have 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, 365, security coverage, not necessarily on site, but from a monitoring station. A pop-up would come up and I would actually have to positively block that door. I'd actually have a camera on the door. I'd be able to see it. I'd have an audio interface. Ladies and gentlemen, please do not panic. You're being held here for your own safety. There is an incident, but it's actually beyond the escape doors in front of you. If you look to your left-hand side, there are some escape doors that we will release just as soon as we've landed the last jet coming in on the runway. But please be aware that you're being held for your own safety. Another one is out of hours, and we kind of touched on that a little bit more here. But look, from an out of hours perspective, we're never going to put a mechanical lock on the door. We're never going to block that door. But what we do have here is we have an ability to provide this secondary lock-in to give us a level of security. I've shown you the old product here quite intentionally, because the old product is available, affectionately known as the Green Frog in Germany. It's the RT VTR product in Germany. And actually, you know, there is a little bit of congratulations here, you know, from a European perspective. Ireland, now you are the second safest country in the world with the adoption of this. The only country that does more than the Republic of Ireland is actually Germany. And in reality, the only real difference here is that, you know, from a German perspective, it's not just the new job you're doing, it's every job. But you now in the Republic of Ireland actually are in the top 2 countries out of the 27 member states. Affectionately known as the Green Frog. You might say, why is it white? Well, in Germany, they're all green. But what we've actually got here is a quick illustration, because we know we've got electrical control, which actually is in the box there. We actually have the electric lock-in element, which is one of several different tested elements on the bottom here. And then we have the initiating element, which in this case is a resettable illuminated machine switch. So those are our 3 components of how this works. And of course, the bit that we've actually said here is they need to be certified together. So looking at the elements there are probably 200 different versions of that terminal. There are actually probably 20 different lock-in options, including an FF magnet that can be used as part of the blocking mechanism. But in all cases, it needs to be a solution that's been tested together, and we need to be able to prove that with our declaration of conformity or our manufacturer's test evidence. And of course, the big thing here is, look, all systems should be interfaced with the building's fire alarm system, ensuring that on a fire alarm activation, we're actually going to escape the building. I'm sure you've already noticed that in this particular case, and it's certainly a common theme going through, there only look like there are 2 elements, because the control and the initiating element are often contained within the same enclosure. Activation is described as resettable illuminated switch. It's not a green call point or break glass. That's quite intentional. It needs to be reset, and we'll see how that works a little bit later on. We've touched on this one a little bit already, because operation of a 13637 solution is escape with a maximum of 2 operations. We've talked about why we wouldn't use the EL561 type of solution. But in this case here, what we can actually see is we've got an escape lock, which can be mechanical. It doesn't have to just be an electric locking device. That could be a mechanical device in the door. If I pull the handle down, it will release, but it won't, because there's a secondary lock in there blocking. And that's all done on this new iPad version here. Press the button, the alarm will sound, and I can go through the door. But this is a read in, read out door. So if I'd read, I get to the door, pull the hand down, I go through the door. When I come back in, I read, pull the handle down, and come through the door. We do also have some products where they're combined. So we've actually got the terminal and the bar all as one. Now, the reality is those are actually quite difficult to specify, and certainly they're the next generation. But what we will find here is we will be using what we term as technically independent solutions as our norm. Several reasons for that. Number one is it's the cost. Number two is functionality, and actually number three is we're overlaying on top of. So, you know, what are we actually looking at for a 13637 solution? Our starting point, our default position, we're always going to have our EM179 lock. So this lock is going to give me free egress from this side. Pull the handle down, I'll always escape. That would be for an emergency escape door. But also, of course, if it's a panic escape door, this would be a 1125 solution. So we'd actually have a panic bar, and that panic bar actually does fit on where that handle is. And then that door then becomes a panic escape door rather than an emergency escape door. They need to be CE marked, and we need a DOP to prove that they are. And then what we then do is we overlay the 13637 solution, which again consists of our 3 components. And our 3 components are electric locking element. We then actually have our initiating device. And you can see in this case, it's like an iPad screen. You'll see how that functions in a minute, because we can press the button, we can touch the button, we can push the pad in. It's a very, very easy device to actually use. And last but not least, we actually have our electrical controlling element. And all of this, of course, is interfaced to the building's fire alarm system. Now, this standard is quite a difficult one to explain, particularly within the short space of time that we've got here. And also, it does get quite complicated to describe how they work together. So look, I've made a very short video on a door that we have in our Watford DAS Academy. It's a new part to our academy. And I'll leave you watching this one as it runs through. Okay, so really moving on there. Hopefully, we all understand that a little bit better. Um, and where we're moving on to now is that we can actually add to this, of course. I mean, this is actually the system, but anything we add to it won't actually change how it works. Anything that goes wrong on this system, anything that breaks, a wire that's not working, a product that's not functioning, the door will revert to a 179 solution. It will always fail in the safe position. But we can put an input-output module, which allows us to do lots of different things. You know, we can use the time zones on the access control system to lock the buildings down out of hours. We can interface with security systems, providing outputs for central monitoring, etc. Anything's possible using our input-output modules. So what we've looked at so far is our technically dependent solutions, and now we're actually looking at the technically dependent version. I've already mentioned that this would be very much a version that we would use um, uh, going forward, because specifying this is actually quite tricky. We do need to order it to the exact size and the exact dimension. Arguably, there's an easier solution, which is using the overlay on top of an existing EL 560 type configuration, which actually allows us to actually get that working and working well. Again, this is technically possible, and certainly as we move more within the door manufacturers and door sets, this door set market, I'm sure we'll see more of these used. One big thing we do need to fire in here is that we will provide full training. It's something that Sarah's going to mention certainly after this call. We do it regularly at our Willenhall office. We appreciate there is a bit of sea in between, and we are or have committed to actually do local training. It's something we've always done with our partners in Ireland. And I will tell you, Ireland is a very important market for Abloy UK. Couple of extra comments really just to fire in here. All right, these are British standards, and we could argue, why are we working with British standards? Now, the reality is I do occasionally get them quoted to me in the Republic. But BS 7273 and BS 9999 are often sort of cited saying we're going to use this British standard to do a fire engineered safety solution. Now, the reality is that these standards actually do stop short of the door. They talk about actuators. But what I can tell you is that there has been an objection raised, and certainly 13637 is a European standard, and it cannot be in conflict with a local standard, albeit our standard. And I do know that British standards are actually looking at these two standards to make sure there is no conflict going forward. We also have our first door standard. Eventually we will have a whole set of door standards. It only applies to a complete door set when it's supplied, but it further reinforces the fact that what we need to be doing here is using the escape standards. This new standard, EM 14351, for a non-fire rated pedestrian final exit door, it is a harmonized standard. It does mean it's mandatory, if you're going to order a door set from a door manufacturer, that they CE mark the door to that standard. But if that door is an escape door, it says it must have a CE marked 179 escape device or 1125 and a 13637 solution. So I think we can see how all of these are actually beginning to build together. Hopefully we have provided some of the missing gaps today. Certainly I know there will be lots of questions, and my contact details are now on screen. And please do feel free to contact me direct should you wish to know a little bit more. Always happy to help. And now I'm going to hand back to Sarah to conclude the event. So Sarah, over to you.
Pat, thank you so much. And, I know before we started, you said, look, it may not be as good as when it's live, but, as somebody who was there for all of the seminars that we did quite recently, it was as good as if it was live. So I really do think that those that are provided with the link to this recording will really benefit from it. So thank you so much. Now, I know we did have a little bit of a technical glitch.
We did, which I didn't mention, but I feel we should mention.
Yeah, that's no problem. We can correct that. So we'll check that video after the recording is completed. And if the sound isn't present, we can make that available or add it in later, and we will do that.
Yeah, there was a tiny schoolboy error there. We tried on 3 different formats to actually get this working, and actually we got the final format in place. And unfortunately, as we started, Sarah said, "You need to share that screen." Oh yes, I do. But when I shared the screen, I needed to tick the box to say allow computer audio. So it's possible the computer audio is not there. We will find out and we will correct. But look, it's good that you can get some information out now.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Pat, we are so grateful to you for making your time available yet again to talk people through these important changes. And it's life safety. So it is so important. So thank you so much, Pat.
Our pleasure.
If you want any further information, Pat's details are there. You can always contact us in the ISIA. You'll get our contact details on isia.ie. And thank you so much for taking the time to watch this information seminar.
Thank you and goodbye, everybody. Right, I've stopped recording.
Great.